up on the show we had 3 weeks ago when we were delighted to be joined by Ken Scott of the Pantera Doro Society and of Sandstone University. We had some great feedback from that show, and Ken promised to come back to answer some of our questions, which he is here to do today. I actually asked the questions from a couple of groups online, and I've got them. We're going to start by asking the questions and get through at least an hour this way, and then if there are any callers who really want to call in with a question, we'll take a couple of calls. We'll just see how that goes. But we do have a mighty good list of questions to keep us going for a good while. And in fact, Ken, if possible, I'd like to ask you back as well, because I think this is going to be ongoing. And I think a lot of people are interested. I've had a lot of really good feedback, and people are definitely interested in what we're doing. So that's where we are for now, and I'm really, really so grateful that you've come back, and sounds like people can hear us now. So hopefully that is the case. Yeah. So I, as you know, have a list of questions, and I'm going to start with a simple one because this has been asked before, and I actually feel that you did answer this to a certain level at one point somewhere before. Mia sent in a bunch of questions. This is her first one that came off her list. I think it's one of the ones I took anyway. It's not true that the enslavement of living beings is invalid, as this has been achieved by deceptive means, not only via lack of full disclosure to the parents of the implications, but without our express consent.
Okay, very good. Well, it's an interesting first question. As with most questions and most points in this whole context of subjects and discussion, it is a multi-dimensional question and answer, meaning there's different ways to look at that. Could we say that, for example, there's a standard maximum in law, which is that fraud vitiates all contracts. The word vitiate means to nullify or make void. So fraud vitiates, makes nullified or void all contracts. Well, that is essentially a maxim in law. There's a universality to that, and it's contained in numerous Supreme Court and other levels of the court system, citations and settled cases. So, in one respect, one dimension, we could look at this and say, yes, it is true that the enslavement is invalid. On the other hand, the actual fact of the matter is that we are enslaved. The fact is we have a world system of 7 billion plus people, almost all of whom are living at some level of enslavement in terms of what we're talking about, the monetary structure and all of that. Many billions, 3-4 billion probably, are living below what we would call a stable, sustainable life for lack of food, medicine, education, and all the other essentials that many people take for granted. So the fact is, in actual physical terms, we're all enslaved. Does it matter that then there's a technical invalidation because of the fraud? Well, it does, and then again, it doesn't. So then again, we have to ask our question, then we go to another dimension of that question. Is it technically fraudulent? And this is a very key point that I would like to convey to everybody in my own personal process, because I've gone through many, many layers in my own education and dealing with it internally. Because as I expressed last time, this is not just an external process, it's internal. We have to address all of these elements within ourselves. That's my point of view, that the layers that I'm referring to is going through those kind of reactions or positions of being angry, being pissed off, being overwhelmed with the magnitude of the situation we have on this planet, all those kind of things. And of course, included in that is polarizing with the system. It is our enemy. The bankers or the cabal or the elite, whomever we focus on, are our enemies. They did it to us. And not seen in legal terms, for lack of better term, this may be offensive to somebody, but I will say it. In legal terms, seeing the perfection of the system the way it is constructed. And what I mean by that is, and when I said people would react, it's like, oh, it's not perfect. Look at all the mess it's created. But what I mean by perfection is that the more you get into seeing this as a complete whole picture, not the analyzing each component parts, but the entire picture, the historical, the construction of the legal system, and all the rest of it, you can see a perfectly integrated, technically speaking, legal construction that can be argued. If you were arguing from that side of the debate, it could be argued that it actually is technically not fraud. Why is that so? For one, quote unquote, it is all revealed. It is all disclosed, because part of fraud is that, like a contract. One of the essential elements of a contract is full disclosure, meeting of the minds, things like that. Another element of a contract is just consideration, a proper exchange of value that both parties, through the meeting of the minds, agree to exchange. And we don't have time to go into that in detail, but I will say from my point of view, with the depth of my research and education, that there is a very strong case to be made that there is full disclosure. It may be hidden in plain sight and hidden in such a spread out, fragmented way that most would say, well, I haven't been told that. But from the other side of the debate, they would say, yes, no, we have put it all in the public record. It is there to be found. And so rather than polarize with saying, oh, it's invalid, let's start from the actual starting point of, no, we are enslaved. How did that happen? How did we get structurally bound through legal, monetary, and other machinations to voluntarily consent to being in the bondage surety status and relationship that I described last time? How did we get there? Because if we don't fight and resist it, if we don't go into reaction and projecting outside of ourselves the anger, the enemy construct, and all of that, and we accept it as the starting point, that for my process was very empowering, because it gave me the ability to stand in a position of not being a victim, not being disempowered because they did it to me, but rather that, okay, I can see how it's constructed, and in the seeing of that, I can see where the remedy is. Because one of the universal principles of law is that there must be a remedy. There always must be a remedy. And so this is what we direct our education in our specific applications to, is understanding how it's constructed in order to understand and see the wired-in remedy. And that's what we do with status correction and how we apply it. And this point will influence some of the later questions and answers and discussions we're going to have from your list that you sent me. So let's keep that in mind, that rather than having that position of it's invalid or somebody outside of us did it, let's look at the perfection of how it's constructed and use it to our benefit to apply the remedy and move ourselves into a position of standing in power in order to start remedying the larger problems on the planet.
That's great. Well, I missed the last little bit of that. Something dropped off for me, but I think you were still there. As long as you were still recording, that was really great. I have been realizing what you were... Can you hear me now, by the way?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes. I've just been really going through that recognition that it's, like you used the puzzle word, it's a mighty puzzle. It feels to me like this has been a test to us to work this out. And you
Jolly, now you fell off. I think you need to adjust something with your headphones or mic or something.
I'll take over here. You have a list of the questions, right?
Yeah, we can continue until she resolves that.
Your remedy is so important to, I think, one of the next questions or one coming up. I'm out in the woods, so I don't have it up in front of me, but it was the remedy is the one that's going to bring the status correction and allow us to travel freely again without anybody travel.
Yeah. Libby, you're also a bit muffled. Can you speak closer to your mic?
Yes, I can. Is that better?
A little bit. Or speak louder. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, it all reverts back to or returns to the key point of remedy. And so, in moving down this list of questions, and I don't know if she said that or if you, the listening audience, heard, if she did say it in her intro, that she put out, she meaning Jolly, and I assume you too, Libby, put out to the audience to submit written questions. So we have 3 pages of written questions that she sent to me yesterday, and hopefully Jolly will come back, but if she doesn't, we'll carry on. So the next question on the list was, what are the differences between your methods and those of, for example, Winston Shrout, Peter Eugene of Privatus, Rod Class, Eucadia, Kurt Kallenbach? Continuing, we could include Jordan Maxwell, but I understand he's a researcher, and I'm not aware that he provided tools to deal with the system. So in relationship to Jordan Maxwell, yes, that's my understanding, or understanding, or overstanding. For those of you who aren't familiar with that little phraseology and wording, it's kind of a maxim now with people who have studied law that when you go into a court and the judge says, do you understand, what he's really doing is saying, do you stand under me? Am I a superior authority? This actually goes back to many of you, if you remember in school, have heard of the Hammurabi Code back in Babylon, one of our first so-called pillars of law. And Hammurabi got his code by standing under the god Marduk, who dictated the code. So he was standing under the god, and so there's where our word understand comes from, which is I just got a text from Jolly Thunderstorms here, connection on and off. Okay, so we'll carry on.
And I think our audience does know about understand.
Yeah,
so that's no other problem.
Yeah. Okay, very good. Okay. So leaving that behind, so you understand that, or you understand. So Jordan, I don't think really brought forth tools. The others mentioned did. The difference, in a lot of ways, there's certain things that are very much the same. Overall, the people mentioned are, for me, leading members of the community who have really pushed the envelope in bringing forward the knowledge and understanding of what we're dealing with, but from different angles. The biggest key for me is whether it gets stopped at or stuck on commerce or on doing things as commercial remedy. And some of the later questions do ask about that, so we will address it later. But this is a process that I went through from the late 90s into like 3-4 years ago, pursuing commercial remedy, commercial liens, commercial affidavits, administrative processes, and things like that. Winston Shrout, of course, is paramount in leading the education in commerce. But I saw where that became a problem. It was actually a dead end, and it had buried hooks in it that created problems for a lot of people. someone like Peter Eugene, a privatist, and his partner Michael, I think they've separated, gone different ways, came to understand this and went much deeper into the things that we do in terms of severing the attachments, rescinding the contracts, terminating signatures, and things like that. Whereas Rod Class, he's kind of in between, but he's still fighting in the court system. What our approach is once you've corrected your status, you do not have to go into the court system. That raises a question, can you enforce that? And it depends case by case, because some people are already entangled in the courts and they have to deal with it accordingly. But if you've processed through the steps that we do sufficiently, then there's a very straightforward way to not accept their invitation. And I phrase it as posing the question, how do you win this game? The answer is by not playing. The minute you accept their invitation into their commercial courts, they gain jurisdiction. And the key is how to understand jurisdiction and to prevent that from happening. Certainly, Franco Collins from Ucadia and Kurt Kallenbach are very well knowledgeable and understanding about that. Each one of those people and many more have been my teachers, resources, and what I've studied. I don't limit, never have, who I've studied and looked at and worked with to understand the piece. What we have done is to integrate all the pieces and do so on a comprehensive level of how we've talked about it in terms of truly perfecting a correction of status.
Okay, I think I'm back now. Thank you.
Oh, very good. Okay.
I've called in on our phone. We've got thunderstorms going on here, and I think my connection online is not good, but the studio is holding up. So, yeah, well, thank you for. I think you did you get most of the sort of question, and you managed obviously to answer a good bit because I missed a lot.
No, yeah.
Okay.
You just missed the Q&A of number 2 under
yes,
Mia.
Yes, and I got the answer. And did you address the part about Heather Ann Tucci-Giraffe and the work with OPP2 filings?
No, let's go through that. The next part of it before that was, why do we have all these separate initiatives, i.e.
Right.
Ken O'Keefe's World Citizen, New Earth
Yes.
Nations Law
Sure.
Academy? Well, in my personal subjective opinion, we have it because we're all unique beings and we have different perspectives. What I would put forward is everybody is working ultimately to the same goal. Even if, for my opinion, I think somebody's going down the wrong track or a dead end, as a collective whole, we are those who have chosen to wake themselves up or in the process of doing so and are working on this planet to balance the system as it is and start bringing forward a new system. We all have what you're calling separate initiatives, and they're just learning locations or modules. My recommendation is you don't get stuck in any one, including what we do. Always open up to be open to all of the possibilities and learn from them. Start creating your own integrated picture of understanding, which is how I've put together, what I've done. So then the question, as you were mentioning, are you aware of Heather Ann Tucci, her work? Yes, I am. What were the problems with it? The problems were what I just mentioned. They were done in commerce. The bottom line is everything in commerce is done as corporate fictions. If we want to be standing as living beings in real life on this planet, we cannot be playing as or attached to the fictions. Does that mean that we can do that right now? No, we are in a transition. This transition might last 10 or 20 or 30 years. So we have to utilize the components of the system, understand how to reposition our relationship to the fictions in law and operate accordingly. But the key is when we operate through a franchise that is the all capital letter version of what looks like our name with all the attachments there too that we've discussed. And we utilize that commercial vehicle to create public funds. And everything that's ever done in that name, every single day, we wake up something somewhere. If you have a utility bill, if you have, if you get a ticket, whatever, in that name, that name is being used to create commercial paper, which is monetized debt. It's creating harm to the public by creating more debt. It also falls under the military occupation and the enemy of the state relationship that we can only operate in commerce by licensing. And we can only participate by being registered into it. We register anything related to that name, we become part of the royal registry, property of the royal estate. And so that's a key to correcting one's status, is to separate and remove oneself from that relationship, to stop creating that commercial paper. You have to utilize other forms of the system, corporate fiction, to operate in life, because we could choose to go live completely isolated on a farm, in a cave, on an island. But if we do that, then from my point of view, we're not participating in bringing forward the solutions. So I choose to figure out a comprehensive solution of how to disconnect the impaired attachment to the commercial vessel, and at the same time being able to operate within the world. So as far as the OPPT process, the problem with it is it created a commercial lien. It utilized the UCC. The UCC is completely owned and controlled by the world monetary system and its owners and controllers. And so if you use that, you are falling back into the trap that is there in the first place. And so there have been many people that I've worked with, walked with, interacted with, or observed through the internet over the last 15, 20 years who we all came up through the levels of study of commerce, commercial processes I mentioned earlier, like with Winston Trout. But I realized about 3-4 years ago that that was a trap. It was a feedback mechanism to hook us back into the bonded surety relationship and to be part of the problem. And therefore, because if it's in commerce, it's fiction. If it's in fiction, it's controlled by their hologram, and we do not have standing there. That's why you must remove yourself from it and have the status and standing that we're talking about.